are the tax returns. Donald Trump is consistently hiding behind the fact that his tax returns are under audit. But as most people know, he does have returns that are not under audit, and he could very easily release those, but he's choosing not to. He's hiding something, okay? And just so that you know, Donald Trump was audited once before. That became public. That's years ago. He was audited by the city and state of New York, and he failed the audit. And it was really interesting. Well, this clip is going to go into that. Here we go. Donald Trump, where are your tax returns?
And as far as the tax returns, as soon as the audit's complete, like any lawyer would tell you, Greta Van Susteren, she was going over it a while ago. She's a lawyer. She said, well, no lawyer would let somebody release a tax return when they're under audit.
Not true.
I've gone through audits, which I think is very unfair, for 15 years. I have friends that are very rich that never get audited. I'm audited every year. Maybe that's because of politics, who knows?
The past 4 decades, every major party nominee has released his or her tax returns, and most of those presidential hopefuls released them by the time they were officially nominated at the party's convention. Not Donald Trump. While candidates are not, of course, legally obligated to release tax returns, Trump's refusal goes against pretty firm, long-standing precedent in the interest of transparency. Trump is now citing an IRS audit, and apparently the advice of Fox News' Greta Van Susteren, as the latest reasons as to why he won't be releasing his tax returns anytime soon, even though, as the Washington Post points out, the first president to release his taxes, Richard Nixon, did so in the middle of an audit. Yesterday, while stumping for Hillary Clinton in Omaha, Nebraska, billionaire investor Warren Buffett called Trump out on it.
Now, I've got news for him. I'm under audit, too. And I would be delighted to meet him any place, anytime between now and election. I'll bring my tax return. He can bring his tax return. Nobody's going to arrest us. It is not. There are no rules against showing your tax returns. And just let people ask us questions about the items that are on there.
Now that's Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett can buy and sell Donald Trump 100 times before waking up for breakfast.
How many of you would be afraid to have your tax return made public? You're only afraid if you got something to be afraid about.
Joining me now, David K. Johnson, columnist of the Daily Beast, author of The Making of Donald Trump, which examines Trump's rise to prominence and is out today. Somehow you've written this book in like the last 15 hours. I'm not quite sure how this happened. All right, so first of all, let's start with this just basic factual stipulation. You've covered taxes for 20 plus years.
Right.
That is the case.
And I teach at Syracuse University College of Law, and I'm not a lawyer.
Right, so you could release there's no reason.
Not only can you do it, but let's take Donald at his word. He doesn't want to release the returns under audit. He's indicated that's 2012 forward. Well, let's see your returns then from 2011 back to, say, 1980. Hillary Clinton's returns are all available, complete returns back to the 70s. There's no reason for Donald not to release the returns by his own standard that are no longer under audit.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on and talk about this topic is, again, we're doing this thing, the last 10, and he says so many outrageous or offensive things, and, ultimately this is a guy with no public service record to look at.
Right.
All he's got is the record in private business, and basically there's very little public documentation about that in some ways. This is the way that you would get some sense of the guy's dealing, like how good or bad he is, right?
Well, ask Hillary Clinton about when I reverse engineered her tax returns and how furious she was. I showed that they paid more than twice as much federal income tax, President Bill Clinton, for several years as needed. I'd tell you a lot if we had Donald Trump's tax returns. I'd tell you about how wealthy he really is from the value of the buildings, the depreciation he's taking. Now, he's got over 500 business entities, so his tax return, if you've seen the picture, is like this high, right, as it should be. But Donald has a long history, and I go through this in The Making of Donald Trump, of using two sets of numbers. So he claims, for example, that his golf course in Los Angeles is worth over $250 million, and then he tells the property tax officials, it's worth 10. his golf course in Westchester County, he says, oh, it's worth over $50 million. Well, no, for tax purposes, it's worth 1.4.
This is my favorite. We covered this. We showed pictures just off Zillow of like houses adjacent to the golf course that are worth $1.4 million.
And listen, a number of the columns I've written at the Daily Beast and the National Memo and other places have shown that there's tremendously strong evidence of tax cheating by Donald, and I can give you the best example of this. In 1984, the city of New York and the state of New York audited his tax returns. He filed a Schedule C, that's what freelancers file, or people who work for themselves, as a consultant. No revenue, zero revenue, over $600,000 in deductions. I know you'll be shocked to hear the auditor said, excuse me, we'd like a little documentation and support for this. He had none. He still ordered an appeal. His longtime tax lawyer testifies, and when he's shown the New York City return, he goes, well, that's my signature on the photocopy, but I didn't prepare that document. Well, the only person who could have done that would be Donald Trump. Wow. And by the way, my first National Investigative Reporting Award more than 40 years ago was for catching somebody who used a photocopier to put their name on somebody else's medical records. I think Donald participated in the empty box scheme at Bulgari, and luckily didn't get indicted, or he would have lost his casino license. I think there's a lot there we could learn, especially about all of the money coming out of Kazakhstan and other former parts of the Soviet Empire to his businesses, which one of his sons has acknowledged, and all of his travels with the son of the reputed mob boss here in New York City, a violent convicted felon who took the broken stem of a margarita glass and plunged into a guy's face, took 110 stitches, and ran then a $40 million stock swindle for the Genovese and Gambino crime families. Donald says, I wouldn't know if he was in the room. Well, I've got photographs and videotape, and I recount episodes in my book. He was with him in Colorado, in Arizona, in Florida, and New York. He signed off on business deals with him.
Point being right here, that and I want to just be clear about what we know and don't know, because I don't want to cast aspersions unnecessarily about documentation. So the point being that a variety of questions have been raised about the variety of business dealings, about where his money's coming from, about who. I mean, this seems to strike me an important thing. Who's the future president of the country owe money to, right? I mean,
yes, no,
who they're on the hook to is a pretty key thing. We've never had something like this. All of that would be answered in tax returns, which in some ways become more important with this candidate than any other we've had before.
Absolutely, and particularly if he owes money to people who are connected to Vladimir Putin. That should be very, very troublesome. We need to see his tax returns. We absolutely need to see them.
All right, David K. Johnson, thanks for stopping by today.
Absolutely. We need to see Trump's tax returns. And I agree with Mr. Johnson. I've reviewed tax returns for approximately 30 years, and I can tear a tax return apart in the blink of an eye. So if anything funny is going on, I see that return. Now, granted, Trump's returns obviously are voluminous to say the least, but given enough time to be able to go through those returns, you can dig out all the dirt